Welcome. My name is Annetta Ford, and I'm excited to be here with you today. You have reached Chasing Home, a live storytelling event brought to you by the Intersections program. Intersections is a new and unique program facilitated by Charlotte based poet, storyteller, and facilitator Hannah Hasan. It is a collaborative effort by Arts Plus, which provides outstanding arts education to students of all ages and backgrounds, and Studio 345, which is a free, creative, out of school youth development program for Charlotte Mecklenburg high school students. Last year, Hannah was approached by the amazing folks at Arts Plus and Studio 345 about creating a project or experience that gave the students of Studio 345 an opportunity to build kinship with the group that is different than them. After the initial meeting, Hannah responded with the idea of partnering a group of Studio 345 students with community leaders, organizers, and elected officials together and connecting them through arts based workshop experiences. The primary art form that is used is storytelling, the sharing of personal, true narratives. Everyone loved the idea, and since it is about what happens when groups of folks who are different than each other let their lives intersect through the power of art, they decided to call this project Intersections. Powered by and supported by the Re-Emprise Fund, during a time when we need to find deep connections of understanding and our collective humanity the most, Intersections was born. For 3 weeks, Hannah creates a safe and brave space for the small group to build bonds of understanding, empathy, and kinship by giving them simple tools to unearth their own stories and share them with each other. It is really a powerful experience. I know this because I am a proud member of Cohort 1 of the Intersections program. Today, you will experience stories from the second cohort. This group of dynamic students and elected officials have spent 3 Fridays together, sharing stories and creating community all on Zoom. Their time together isn't about anyone's job title or positioning in the community. In fact, that rarely came up. It was about the tender moments that make us all human. Each week, one theme kept coming up: home. Stories of what it means to feel safe and loved and challenged and supported and happy and sad and joyful and at peace and in fear and in celebration and in mourning, all at home. In a city where home is a consistent topic of discussion and action, it felt fitting to build this show around it. Today, all of the storytellers will share pieces that center the space of and feeling of home. These are their true stories written by them, shared with their courage and full open hearts. Please receive them with love and care. If you have a question during the show, put it in the question box. After the stories, we will chat with the storytellers a bit, but for now, find a comfy spot, grab a snack, and get ready for the show. Introducing Hannah Hasan and Cohort 2 of the Intersections program. We give you Chasing Home.
Today, we're sharing the stories that explore themes of home. And during our time together, the past 3 weeks, this group has explored sharing stories with many different emotions attached to them. So we've experienced stories of hurt and pain, of freedom and joy, and of course, of love. And though we weren't looking specifically for a theme during the workshopping process, one has definitely emerged. You've heard us mention it a few times already: home, of moments of the comforts of home, the loss of home, of the people who make our homes what they are, of the seasons that we find ourselves in at home, and of course, coming home to oneself. So today, as everyone shares their pieces, and I will reiterate that are written by them and of their own true experiences, we honor them, the storytellers, as people who live and give to our home here in Charlotte and we hold space for them and for their stories. But we could not approach stories of home without a pause to acknowledge that we are coming to you from our home in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we give love and light to the indigenous people of this land, the Sugary people and the Catawba people. We give love and light and honor to the ancestors of African descent, specifically those brought to this land against their will. And we honor the people and the sacrifices, for we would not have the ability to hold space today if it were not for them. And as we begin, we approach stories of leaving home. What happens when a mother, a parent, has to make space for their young one to go out on their own, to chart their own path? And what will that young one take with them on this road to self-discovery? What does it mean to leave home? So starting out, sharing their true stories, we create and hold space for County Commissioner Susan Rodriguez McDowell and student leader Eden Benton, Eden Perry Benton. You all give it up at home for Susan and Eden. Eden.
I'm supposed to leave you one day, aren't I?
You are.
You count the Saturdays until I do?
150 something. That's not enough.
I'll always stick with you. I'll never leave you.
You will, as you should.
But today's Monday.
Saturday will come before we feel ready. I will look for you in the usual places, but you won't be there. Your shoes won't be under my feet. I won't have to yell. You're finding your path. You're learning your truth. Are you eating right? Your room is empty. I miss your chaos. I miss your mess. Do you have clean clothes? They aren't on your floor. Where are they now? Are you thinking of us back at home? We're thinking of you, wondering where you are. We know you are growing. We hear it in your voice when you call. The light bulbs switch on, and then they start bursting. We see them shining bright in your words. You get it. Something has broken through. You learned something new. We well up. We aren't there to take in every moment. You are changing without us. But are you really? It's still you under there. We see you, who you've always been. Your essence is not changed. You're just more you. We capture a moment with you, but then you're off, as you should be. Remember, you're wearing my heart on the outside of your body, so go easy.
I know we're not in the same room anymore, but Mom, I'm just next door. I'm just across the hall. I'm just downstairs. And I know that it's weird for you to have to yell at me when dinner is ready, walk to me when you want to hug, call me when you want to say goodnight. But I thought you were tired of picking up my socks. I thought you were tired of listening to my loud music. I thought you wanted your own space that's not about me. So I left. But even when my door is shut, the light is on. I'm waiting to hear your footsteps. I'm waiting to hear the door creak open. I'm waiting to smell your favorite perfume as you kiss me on my forehead, as you turn off the lights. But you always leave the door open just a crack as you leave. I've been living my life Monday through Friday.
As you should. But you always come home on Saturday.
But you're leaving me.
I'll always stick with you. I'll never leave you.
I thought you would live until you were 150 something. But you won't. So I hope, will you leave me on a Saturday so that on Sunday I can prepare for a Monday without you?
The day will come before we feel ready.
I dare not count the Saturdays. There aren't enough.
We could not share the stories of home without reflecting on the people that make our homes filled with joy, and even the ones that carry the pain. What have the people in our lives taught us about home, and how will it impact the people that we are to become? Sharing their true stories, we create space for student leader Ruby Davis, Judge Lou Trosh, and student leader Jordan Montgomery.
The cats in the vents at the old elementary school always looked at me with eyes wider than the moon, their fur matted down against their skin, flattened like snowbanks. I wanted to take them home with me and save them from the bite of the cold. That's why they were in the vents after all, to hide. I didn't really understand the feeling then, 7 years old and never having felt goosebumps before. But the vent is their home, my dad told me after I begged to rescue them. You don't want to disrupt them. I was like that as a kid, rescuing dying butterflies and letting stray dogs follow me home in hopes that I could keep icicles from dripping off their sharp teeth. But I didn't know that freezing sting until both my parents pulled up to my school in the gray Prius, dashes of sunlight glinting off its metal shell. That was the last sunlight that felt real for a while. When I opened the door, the first thing that I saw was my mom's puffy red eyes and my dad's blank but sympathetic face. A marble statue. Bad news, kiddo, he said in that voice he used when the ground was crumbling away, low and rolling like ocean waves. My mom held my tiny hand before she spoke. Your Aunt Lisa died. To this day, the fact that I only cried because my mom had to leave still wrenches in my ribs every time it crosses my mind. About a month later, when my mom asked me how I'd feel about getting a sister, I beamed and said yes. I'd always wanted a little sister. When we got home that day, I asked my dad if he knew my mom was pregnant. She wasn't. My sister wasn't a stranger to me like I thought, but a shadow, someone I'd met a few times before. She was my cousin by blood, but I'd learned to know her as a sibling after 7 years of sharing a wall. But all dogs have sharp teeth, and cats have claws, and butterflies have wings they can use to fly away into the open sky. I remember her crying on a swing set in the backyard and how my mom's eyes faded out and glazed over every time she looked at her. That's when I felt the cold for the first time, when a rescue mission finally lasted. But she must have felt even colder, and the house felt like it turned to a husk instead of a home. I started picturing what it would be like for me, uprooted and lost. Every time I shut my eyes, I pictured my parents lying lifeless and myself living in a house that wasn't mine. Then my sister and my mother started to fight. It was a blizzard, freezing and sick and inescapable. So I hid, tucked in vents, and tried to flap my wings even though I was stuck on the cruel concrete. I stopped loving, stopped drawing, stopped trusting, stopped writing. Everything was quiet, and the world felt like a double-edged sword. Spring always follows winter, though. My sister and I began to talk more, and I realized that she wasn't a puzzle piece jammed in my family's puzzle that wouldn't fit unless someone cut it into shape. but a piece of a different puzzle altogether. Not everyone had to be stuck in one little spot. They can fit into other places, other puzzles, and I could too. After a while, through endless car rides and dripping snow cones, the house felt less hollow again. My sister now has that same Prius that my parents came to school in. And every moment that I start to feel the sting of freezing air again, I remember. Water can be made thicker than blood, and people are ever-changing tides.
So I'm looking real carefully, and I'm pretty sure it's a road. Yeah, it's a road going deep into a forest. Yeah, that's what it is. Well, really, it's a photograph of a road going deep into a forest. A photograph of a road going deep into a forest that my daughter Presley took. A photograph that my daughter Presley is getting an award for. My daughter's an artist. That's right, my daughter's an artist. And I'm so proud about that, but I'm also confused about that because we trashes are most definitely not artists. I mean, we sing badly and we dance poorly and we draw stick figures, but artists we are not. How then? Like, where does my budding little artist come from? I mean, besides your beautiful piano playing mom, and usually remembering that the art gene came from my lovely life, that'd be my answer and I'd move on. But as I look at that road in the photo, I know this question stretches out way bigger and longer than it started out. Just who is my daughter in relation to me, in relation to anyone? For that matter, who are any of us in relation to anyone else? And just where do we come from, any of us? And as I'm thinking these thoughts and looking at that road, all of a sudden my mind, it's heading down that little path and deep into the woods too. No, what I really mean to say is that all of me is heading down that road, all the way down that road until I saw my grandpa way back at the beginning of his road when he was like 8 years old and he was scared and alone, but also not alone because, you know, he told me one time that for him, real church was out in the woods and that's where he felt best praying. And I wasn't allowed to tell my grandma about that, but now I know it's true because one time I saw him in his church. I mean, I was right there when it happened. Though I still don't even really know exactly what happened, and maybe that doesn't even matter. Let me explain. See, my grandpa, he was in a hospital, and he was 91, and he had congestive heart failure, and he was dying. And I was there with him in his little room. You see, T.C. Conrad, he didn't like hospitals, and he didn't do alone. So I was there with him, keeping him company and trying to get comfortable in the most uncomfortable hospital chair that anybody ever designed. You know, the ones that kind of halfway sort of recline and they're too small for even regular sized people and they've got wires poking out in the worst places that wires could ever poke out. And I'm 6'6" and I'm trying to get at least a little sleep, but my knees are folded up under my chin and I'm already knowing that my back's going to hurt all the way down my legs tomorrow. But really, I'm too scared right now to think much about wires and folded up knees. What was going to happen to my grandfather? I mean, the old school patriarch of my family. My grandpa, who came from a hard scrabble farm in the middle of Nowheresville, Indiana, and somehow he got a scholarship to college. I mean, it was something about he won a prize hog and a spelling bee or some test, and he bred the hog and used the money he saved, but that's really a different story. And if college wasn't audacious enough for him, he then put himself through Harvard Law School in the middle of the Depression. My grandfather was the most interesting and intimidating and complicated man that I ever knew. Like I said, he was an old school patriarch. And here he is lying 5 feet from me in one of those stupid paper hospital gowns, you know, the ones that won't even close in the back. And he's wearing that instead of his usual coat and tie, which he always wore. God so help me, he wore a tie when he was in his tomato garden. And my grandpa, he's dying. And I don't know if he knows it, but I know it. And right now, that's really all that matters. So sleep doesn't come easy to me that night. In fact, I can't believe I ever drifted off at all. I mean, with that chair from hell and the beeping of all the machines, that my grandpa was hooked up to, and the nurses coming in and out and in and out and in and out. And most of all, the thoughts, the kind of thoughts that you can't shut up no matter what you do. But somehow drift off I did. And now it's pitch black. Well, I mean, it's pitch black as a hospital ever gets. And it's really late. It's like 3 a.m. or something. And I'm all of a sudden wide awake again. And my grandpa, he's sitting straight up into his bed, and he's talking really loudly. And as I get my bearings, I see that he's looking up in the top corner of the room, and I look at him, and he's not 91 at all anymore. 85 years have melted away completely, and his whole face has changed. I mean, it's the same face, but it's also not the same face at all. My grandpa, the patriarch, whose love was always conditional. Well, I mean, except for me and my brothers, but don't really tell anybody about that. Anyway, he's 8 years old. I don't mean he looks 8. I mean, he is 8. And it's his eyes. It's his eyes. His eyes, they're wide, all the way wide open. And they're really afraid. And you can see the fear in them straight away. It's not shielded like usual when, unless you knew him really, really well like I do, you couldn't even see the fear in his eyes. Now that fear was still there, of course, but it usually looked like anger and sometimes even like hate, like a lot of men from his age, his place, his time. Not now, though. In fact, his whole face was transformed, and he's talking in a different tone of voice than I'd ever heard before, like begging, really. He's saying, more time and things to do and things to fix, not ready yet, not ready yet. And if he's scared, I'm terrified, because if my grandpa's 8 years old talking to somebody or something that I can't even perceive, where was he? Where was I? Who the hell am I? And am I even here at all? And he kept talking, and I keep watching, and he kept begging, and I keep watching, and he keeps pleading, and I keep watching for a couple of minutes or an hour or a lifetime or maybe an eternity. I really have no idea. And he was crying, and I never saw him cry. Ever. And I was crying too, but that happens more often. Anyway, when the machines that he was hooked up to, they started with all their buzzers buzzing and their dingers dinging, and maybe they had been doing it the whole time, but I sure didn't hear them until now. So I'm scrambling to call the nurse, and because she'll know what to do. I know she'll know what to do. So I push the call button, but the damn call button, it's on the same little contraption that the bed controls and the TV and everything else is on. So the bed, it starts raising up. My grandpa's bed, it's raising up, and then the TV comes on. It's like volume 100, and of course, it's a TV preacher yelling, "Be saved," at the top of his lungs. A TV preacher, seriously? Now? Come on. So I make myself calm down at least a little bit, and I find the right button, and I call the nurse. And while I wait for her, I'm all up and unfolded now, and I'm up and pacing back and forth, by the way, and all of a sudden, my grandpa, he looks through me, but he looks so peaceful. And then he just lays back down in the bed, and he's sound asleep again. And when I look closely at him, he's 91 years old again. And then the nurse, she gets there, and she tries to calm me down, and she says, "Well, honey, I don't know what happened, but he's resting comfortable now, and his vitals are perfect. You just go on back to sleep yourself." Yeah, right. I didn't sleep 1 second the rest of the night. And if that's not crazy enough, when the doctor came for his morning rounds at like 6:30 in the morning, he checked my grandpa, who was still sleeping peaceful like nothing happened. And then he asked me to step outside. I don't think I can take any more, not now, but I go out anyway. What else am I going to do? And he's shaking his head, and he says something like, "I don't know exactly what to say to you." And I spit out something like, "Well, just tell me like it is, Doc." And he says, and his response still lives with me, and he says, "Well, yesterday I was pretty well convinced that your grandfather wasn't going to leave this hospital, but after checking him this morning, he's remarkably improved, and if this continues, I'm probably going to discharge him tomorrow. It's really remarkable." And I ask him, "What, how did this happen? Like, what has happened?" And he just shakes his head again as he's walking away, and he says, I've done this long enough. I can't explain everything. Call it a miracle, call it whatever you want, but he's as healthy as I've ever seen him. I don't know how, I don't know why. And again, he shakes his head while he walks away down the hall. So yeah, I saw my grandpa's childhood church. And my grandpa, he got his extra time, 2.5 years to be exact. And the road, it went on. And you know, even after he passed on, his road kept going on and merging with others and winding along through my mom and then through me and now through my daughter and my son. And way down that road, those eyes of his, they started getting better and better until more and more they could see past the fear and those eyes could see beyond the hate. And you know, all good artists, you know, especially photographers, they got to have really good eyes for good perspective, right? And now I'm standing back in front of that photo again and I'm looking at it and now I get it. I mean, at least a little bit. And just for a minute, I see my place and all of us together somewhere on this road. And I say quietly to myself, it's quite a road and it goes on forever. And at that moment, my daughter, she's right behind me and she hears me and she pats me on the shoulder and says, you know, Dad, it's really a log that kind of looks like a path into the woods. Now I see. Now I see. And I turn and I hug her. And I say, of course, yes, 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 of course. It's a photograph of a log.
I'm a spring baby, born of joy and warmth and the smell of pollen and the taste of sweet homemade lemonade that always leaves a sour feeling right between my molars. Always leaves me craving more. As I've grown, I've always enjoyed those perfect moments. The perfect weather with the gentle breeze to cool me down at the perfect moment. Every other weekend, I hear stories about how he was there for these perfect moments. In these moments, he became my breeze in the stories he tells. He puts together my sky. He tells me it was blue even when the clouds made it so dense it was a gray hue. He buys me ice cream and takes me on the Ferris wheel where I was delighted to see the horizon. The city was so broad, I doubted I could ever lay the shoes he bought me on all of it. He tells me that he made the sky and those buildings that graze it so gently will one day be mine, because he owns everything. It is so easy to believe he is my perfect moment. The illusions fall apart though. As summer sets in, it's too hot to sit on the park bench, and the green monkey bar surrounded by hot mulch burns my hands. And when I fall, the mulch burns my knees, and I go to him and I say, why did you bring me here? It's not perfect like you said it would be. He looks down with a smile and the perfect illusions start to spill from his lips. I did it all for you. He says it so smoothly you would think he owns a book and memorized all of these perfect scenes. It's fall now, and I look out the car window. The leaves seem to lose their color, and everything seems a bit darker, but it's still stunning, because I know today will be the perfect day. I jump out the car and turn to him and I say, I have not felt that cooling breeze in a while. The sky seems grayer than usual and the city looks smaller. You could see the sudden panic and fear in his eyes. The color had drained from his world. I looked up to him wanting a perfect scene as he had done all the times before. I waited patiently with a note of curiosity and fear in my voice. I say, why does everything seem so different? We're in a snowstorm. The world seemed so dark and cold, and I was not prepared because I did not bring the jacket of lies he spent years crafting for me. I knew he was looking for it. Slowly, I realized the breeze was just a fan that sits idle in the living room, and the shoes that I had planned to march the city with were a replacement for the empathy and mindfulness and self-reflection that comes with being a father. He tells me to get back in the car with the angry, stern voice. He's learning. I'm smart, independent, and for some reason that's a little too scary to deal with. There was no lie that would cover up the fact that the scenes were too perfect and the photos were too blurry to see clearly, and the breeze became so cold it made me shiver. He looks and he says, "I'm taking you home." I say, "Take me home." To my surprise, we pull into a driveway that's stained with our memories. The comfort was not there for the first time. I realized he was not my home.
Now we go to the feeling of nostalgia, of longing for the places that we call home, the feeling of the need, of the desire, the yearning for the places that teach us our most important lessons, that help us to learn about life and who we are. What happens when the places and spaces that we call home are no longer within reach? Sharing their true stories, we create space for County Commissioner Laura Meyer and student leader Rashana Sherman.
The phone call from my mother, her voice thick with despair. "Oh, Laura," the eye came straight up the harbor, and the line went dead. I was left with nothing else except a radio reporter saying, "We've been told you can only see the rooftops on Sullivan's Island." It was midnight on September 22nd, 1989, and Hurricane Hugo had made its entrance into Charleston, stretching across sea and land as a 40-mile-wide eye traveled up the harbor at high tide. The life of sun and sand had made a stark turn with this unwanted guest, leaving in its wake destruction, sadness, loss, grief. Where people came to play, laugh, live, now muddy debris. Homes demolished, trees snapped off mid-trunk like toothpicks, no electricity for weeks, dark nights. 1 week after Hugo made landfall, we were permitted on the island for the first time to retrieve our belongings. By then, though, locked away in the wet, the mud, the blistering, humid heat of a southern fall, our belongings had been left to rot. The only bridge to the island was left useless and the roads were undrivable. So we crossed over by boat, crossed over the very water that was 1 week earlier so brutal. 20 years later, stepping off a boat onto a dock, a breeze crossed over the marsh, bringing the unmistakable smell of marsh mud, and with it, the vivid memory of that day when we opened the door to our home, where we were smacked by that same stench. It was that moment I realized that the memory of my home had been replaced by the smell of marsh mud. I will never be able to separate the two. That day, while our nostrils were filled with the unpleasantness of mud and rot, our eyes confronted the dead fish dotted throughout the house, the clearly defined waterline on the walls, and the obvious loss, the loss of replaceables, furniture, clothes, but the real loss of baby and family pictures, school pictures, pictures of trips, yearbooks, music albums, mementos, keepsakes, covered in mud, erased by water, gone in a night. Thankful for our lives? Yes. Thankful my parents evacuated? Yes. Thankful we had each other? Yes, yes, yes. I lived then with the deep feeling of loss, conflicted with how I should feel, thankful for our lives. I was in mourning over just things. It was a conflict within. Hugo left Charleston that night, traveled to Charlotte, and then to Boone, where I was in college. Hugo took out trees and power along the way, leaving a path of destruction. It left my childhood home at the beach, only to arrive at my college home in the mountains. Time has moved on, though, as time does. I've grown, I've lived. The sun does come out. The water is calm. The wind is quiet. And the home of my childhood still lives in my heart.
I'm hours away, but in my mind, You seem to stay like a good earworm that doesn't want to give me a break. Hey, but when you're before my eyes, time's like sand slipping away, slipping away. Those 3 days a year go by fast, zipping away, zipping away. Life isn't all bad, but I often find myself unable to climb out of the pits of sadness, barely making it out of the murky waters, striving to suffocate me with its negativity. When times like these come around, my home no longer feels like home, and I need space to breathe, take back the breath I lost when fighting for my stability. Everyone calls it a vacation, but to me, it's the fresh air that gently pushes me back to the right path. I consider the beach my second home. Waves are clear as day, there's nothing like you. You're the sun's runway, a beautiful view. And it sucks when I have to leave such a soothing escape behind. Despite arriving with the knowledge that my stay would only be temporary, it still stings when we pack up our bags and drive away. Away from the endless ocean, warm sand, that air you only find on the coast now fading away, especially when you don't know the next time you'll be back. But with the memories I collected from my getaways, some captured in the form of thoughts on seashells I discovered, I use them as a refresher. I wash away the stress and try my best to start off the next day on a good note without the crutches of my second home. I'm hours away, but in my mind, you seem to stay like a good earworm that doesn't want to give me a break. But when you're before my eyes, time's like sand slipping away, slipping away. Those 3 days this year went by fast, zipping away, zipping away, zipping away.
We think about home during a season of change. The actual season, autumn or fall, but also the seasons of our lives. You know, the moments that we're coming home to ourselves, changing, growing, elevating, sharing their true stories. We create space for student leader Zara Mahdi and for Judge C. Renee Little.
The seasons change and it feels like home, especially autumn, because autumn is my happy place. It's where I feel the most nostalgic, the most sentimental, where the butterflies leave my body. It's where I stay and drink coffee and my adrenaline pumps up. The evenings are hazed and filled with synesthesia, the brown leaves falling off the trees. But nothing specifically beats the month of October. I turned 18 years old on October 23rd, 2020. I don't know. I really didn't think much of it, but it was monumental. It was a brighter day in fall time. I was feeling happy, but also restless, resentless, and monumental. Most of my birthdays usually feel like this. I feel as if I'm getting older and everything's a lot more personal. Everything slows down. It feels weird, but good. The morning of my birthday felt hazy. It was early. I woke up and I didn't feel any older. I splashed cold water on my face. I wanted to feel that feeling of growth, that feeling of adultness. I wanted to feel that different feeling you feel on your birthday, but it didn't happen quite then and there. I still had to go downstairs to school. The afternoon felt restless. I was feeling older. Finally. It was like I didn't want the day to end. And once it got to nighttime, I felt relentless. I got to eat my favorite dinner my mom made for me. I sat at the table and jammed my fork into a good old piece of ribeye steak. It felt oily and juicy on my tongue. I let it seep down into my belly and reach the pit hole. And later on, I got to eat a good slice of red velvet cake, my favorite type of cake. I placed my fork into the piece of cake. I ate it up slowly. It felt moist and good. I felt the rich white icing hit the back of my tongue. I let it hit my belly, and I felt that good butterfly feeling I feel in the pit of my stomach. It's very synesthetic. It's like all of my anxieties come and then leave my body. And I feel really, really good. I felt as if everything was behind me and I was on top of the world. I felt weightless. I felt as if it wasn't Corona season. We didn't have to go to school. I didn't have to experience feeling too responsible. I didn't have to get a job, a car, a college degree. I didn't have to worry about a dorm room or a code. I felt as if I weren't any of the other teens around me. And lastly, it was a great night in autumn, and I didn't want it to be over. I loved it. I was 18. It was my favorite season. And it felt like home.
You are a wonder. You are so dope. Your lightning and thunder, your leaves burst asunder. You harvest my hopes. You are a hickory burning. Your warm chill in the air. You are a mystery. You thrill me and fill me with beauty so rare. And you are a fire because you inspire. You change and rearrange my world. You drop gems of joy and color. I watch your majesty unfurl because you're a fire. I was born in August, a summer month. I really appreciate being born in the summer because it meant I never had to go to school on my birthday. But even though I like summer, when I reflect on my life, when I think about the seasons of the soul and the changes of life, I realize that some of the best moments in my life have happened in the autumns of my life. In September of 1993, I began college at the Clark Atlanta University. That very same month and year, I fell in love for the first time in my life. In November of 1996, I experienced love of a different kind when I gave my life to Jesus Christ. And 20 years later, in November of 2016, I married the love of my life. The theme of our wedding, autumn harvest. And then 4 years later, in November of 2020, I accomplished a lifelong dream when I was elected as a district court judge in my beloved hometown of Charlotte, North Carolina. You know, life has so many changes, ups and downs, highs and lows, joys and sorrows, triumphs and tragedies. But no matter what has happened in my life, I take a lot of comfort in remembering all the great things that have happened in the fall. Raking leaves with my sister and my dad, homecoming, football. For me, fall brings hope. It is warm, it brings renewal, it is fire. It's not just homecoming, it's home. Fall is love. Yes, you are a fire, and nothing is dire about the way you paint the scene. You see, you kiss the summer, you whisper the winter, eternal, fraternal twin of spring. Yes, you are a fire. You are a flame. You're all of the seasons, and one of the reasons I praise his name. You are a fire, and you, I am renewed. I savor your splendor. I walk in your wonder, in awe of you. Because you're a wonder, you are a fire. We are the fire, the world renewed.
And there we have it, all of these beautiful fires and stories of home and belonging and all of the good things. I want to thank each and every one of you of sharing open-hearted, minded spirit stories today.